Hey, I'm Chris, and I'm trying to connect with the people who live close by me, people that are, maybe 5 miles away or just a few minutes drive, so that together we can grow some food that we can share. And in that process, inspired by my interactions with Jesse, I want to invite you to start something like this if you don't live close by me or by Jesse, or to join and let's work together and we can grow some food to make gardening easier, to make connecting with nature easier, to know our neighbors, and oh my gosh, a bazillion other reasons. But first, what is a hive? Well, there's lots of different ways that you could put a hive together. And Jesse has one particular model that I'm gonna go deeply into today. And I'll briefly show you a little bit about the model that I have going that works with me as an apartment dweller. So let's check it out.
Let's look at a really basic template of how a Thrive-Hive starts. Basically, you need someone who has a contribution of some sort. So if you're a gardener, you could offer your bonus harvest or teach. If you're a homeowner, you could offer some of your space. And if you wanted to offer something else, like let's say you really love to cook or prepare food, you could offer that. So let's just go one of these routes. Let's say you have yard space, but you don't know anything about gardening, you've never done it before, but you would love to offer that space. Well, what you would do is you would reach out to your neighbors, local gardening Facebooks or next door groups, and you would say, hey, I'd love to grow food together I can share. Here's my obstacle though. I've never grown before, so I'd love to offer space to someone who lives close by. And then you could start gifting that space, and before you know it, you have people that you're working with to grow food. Maybe you're getting help with that in other ways, and you can start funneling, food scraps and other leftover resources into something you could eat. Now, maybe in another situation, maybe you grow, but you don't actually have space. Well, same thing. You could go and reach out to your neighbors and say, hey, I'm amazing at growing tomatoes, but I've run out of space. Or I would need help processing tomatoes. I wonder if any of y'all would like to help. And same thing. So you start with whatever you can contribute, and then you go from there. And even if you've never grown before, or maybe you don't have yard space, you could offer to help a local gardener and learn what you can and help that way. So you can start getting to know your neighbors and have food that we can share. So this is a look at how my particular Thrive-Hive works. So I live in an apartment, so I don't have a whole lot of outdoor space. So I can't really contribute yard space as starting a particular hive. But you'll see later as we talk to Jesse that that's a part of where he started. So what I did do though is I did manage to grow, and I continue to grow about 70% of all of my salad greens. Now it's maybe closer to 100%. So what I can do is I can share some of those with other people who are growing nearby different types of food. Let's say you grow great peppers and I grow great microgreens. Awesome. Let's get together. Let's make a salad and do that on the regular. That sounds awesome. So, so that's one possibility. If someone that lives nearby me has yard space that they want to contribute, amazing. So me and other gardeners in the hive, we can work together and build a garden there so we can have food that we can share. Or if you've never grown anything in your life and you wouldn't know where to start, but you would love to learn how to grow, I can help people in my hive get started with microgreens. And so that is all based around urban dwelling and how to kind of make that work as me being the main person starting this. So I started with a workshop. I reached out to a bunch of different neighbors and did that. And that's how we're starting. So we have like some microgreens growing. We're sharing whatever else other gardeners are growing and whatnot. And we have just this little basic system in place to know where the microgreens go, so we can start making a closed loop system where we grow all the seeds for the microgreens, etc. Now lately, because I've met some different people who have chickens and other types of gardens, we're probably going to add to this. So it's going to be an even richer system, which is pretty exciting. So next we'll have a talk with Jesse about how his hive works. And at the end of this, you can decide if you happen to live close to one of us to join one of our hives, or you could start your own. And my goal is to create some support for that so that you can do that if you want to. Or at the very least that you share this idea, because I bet you there is someone in your neighborhood who would love to start this with help or be a part of this. If you want to share this, you can go to commongardenground.com/thrive, and that is a way to get an idea of how all of this works. All right, so let's talk to Jesse.
I basically want to answer the question of, if you just moved to Austin and you care about gardening and you care, or really you care about the planet, and you want to feel like you have some community around you that can work together, not just for crisis, but also for living a better life through nature, modeling nature and interacting with nature and getting to know the people here. How would you do that? And I would love to be able to really answer that question. Because I thought when I went to Austin, everything was going to change and there's going to be all these people knocking on my door to help me with my garden. Because I was like, Austin's the only eco city in Texas, and none of that happened. And so
we're faux green here. We're virtue signal green. We are.
We're changing that, damn it. So at least with 20 people, great. So yeah, I really want to answer that for someone who's not going to go into the field of being a professional farmer. I mean, maybe that could be the start towards that journey, but who is an average citizen and wants to know what could I do? So
I want to support somebody who wants to go into larger, small farming, middle-sized farming as well, especially if it's sustainable minded and community minded. Like I'm Hive is just where that's where I know I can contribute. So that's where I focus.
Yes. Yeah. So, and of course, if I lived next door and I was in an apartment, I would be set because y'all have composting and all that stuff. So it would be much easier. So I see the tremendous value in it. I think you had started a group of like sharing resources between people. What was that about?
So when the pandemic hit, my immediate, I have a history in Austin with a small group of local growers, urban farmers to small farmers that my ex-wife and I helped start over a decade ago, called the Austin Growers Guild. That was the name we came up in. We hosted regular meetings with people, and we spent an hour and a half on introductions, and then everybody would leave. It was super fun. Like it was just a lively group. And out of that collective was this, the idea of sharing resources, especially among the local farmer, local growing community. And my ex-wife and I were kind of the primary facilitators of getting that network going. And at some point we got distracted with other things and we stopped hosting, and the whole thing kind of it stopped. It didn't, go away. The connections are still there, but we haven't formed as a group in a long time. So I already had some time and experience kind of working in the idea of like local food, sustainability, supporting local growers, things like that. And I reached out to the Growers Guild and started having some meetings to see if I could get other people interested in starting a collective. And at the time I didn't have a garden. I still consider myself somewhat of a brown thumb. But I recognized the need enough that I was committed to take the steps forward to learn, to figure out how to garden, and recognize that learning how to grow food was failing frequently and failing often, and just keep going until your failures start turning into successes. Like I talked to enough people in the gardening community to recognize that the biggest limitation to anybody being a good gardener is that they quit after their first failure. And they never come back to it. And so I made a commitment to fail is basically what I did.
And so you had a network of growers already that you could either share resources with or they could share with you.
Potentially, we weren't actually doing that, and out of that growers guild in the past, we had actually had some of that network that took place. In fact, we helped organize a farm raising, hog mile. What's the name of it? 5 Mile Farms on Hog Road. Randy, who you met in the last meeting, he ran that farm, but prior to him taking over that farm, it was another guy. And we organized a work party, had a bunch of people show up over 2 days and did a ton of work in order to prepare that land to be a farm. If you're going to form these things, you have to have people who are committed and sticking to it and long form commitment. And it can't be about one person. Each person has to have their own level of commitment, and there's a level, there's some accountability and motivation and inspiration that we all provide each other. When I reached back into that at the beginning of the pandemic, it was really Randy and another friend of mine, Stephen Hubbard, who are both farmers, who kind of jumped in and we facilitated some meetings, and out of that started my particular hive, which I think we have like 8-9 people who kind of participate in different ways in my hive.
So you have 8 or 9 people, and what all is happening with that? So you have compost, you have what else?
Well, I'll kind of start you off with my thought process. So I came in, I came into gardening end of March, beginning of April. And I had just I was finishing up my bachelor's degree. And finishing up my bachelor's degree meant going back and taking physics and chemistry. So I had all this fresh conceptual chemistry. I'm not like deep dive chemistry, but conceptual chemistry, understanding how basic atoms, like to play with each other. And so composting made sense. Like I understood, on that level, I was able to composting makes sense. And knowing that I'm not an experienced gardener, I made the conclusion that if I want to be a good gardener, I have to start by learning how to grow soil, living soil. Growing living soil. And if I grow living soil, more than likely all the rest will be a lot easier. Yeah. So that started on the composting as an experiment. And so that's evolved over the past year. And it's been a slow process because we're not, we're gaining the knowledge as we go, and we're making mistakes as we go, and we all have limited time and limited energy to put into it. So from the beginning of that to now, we basically created a compost system in the backyard, and we have our first big pile of ready to go compost. It's about 2 cubic yards of really rich compost. And so we're trying to get to a compost methodology where we can create a ready-made compost in 30 days. And make enough, that way we can make enough not just to support my property, but also the other properties in the hive as well. We are at the point, we're not at making compost in 30 days, but I think we're at the point where we're making compost in 60 to 90 days, which is still pretty good. Mm-hmm. Which I think as we go into the next cycle of it, we'll get better at it and faster with it. And one of the things I found with the winter garden that was the biggest issue is you get transplants. You go to a few different nurseries, you're getting transplants that are from plants that are grown in different soils and different locations. You're bringing in the pests, sometimes you get plants that are a little too root bound. You can't tell that at the store, and you put them in, they just don't grow. They don't thrive, and it's costly, it's expensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I don't have a grow room. I'm kind of hoping that I don't become the seed starter. I don't want to necessarily take that job. So I'd like to have somebody in the hive that they like that part. They like starting having the buds come up, and then they distribute the transplants to the different properties, and we all share soil. So the compost that they're using to grow those seeds is coming from my property, and is being shared with other properties so that that we have some commonality of growth. And I practice gift economy, and I see gift economy as being one of those things. You saw gift economy in action with the storm from like the Buy Nothing groups, where people just chipped in and started helping each other out, and there was no question of who was paying for it. People just did it because that was what was necessary in order to help. I love that concept, and it's unfortunate that people learn it through a crisis. And if we can learn how to harness that in times of not a crisis, we can actually create a more resilient community so that the next crisis we have an even more robust supplemental system in place.
What I loved about what you're doing is that you're starting with a local group of people and making connections. And this is actually something that I've been wanting to do. So I'm curious about when you were going to open up the Hive to bring other people in. It was so that they could contribute in other ways, like the seed starting. But then I also was wondering, were you thinking of it staying very like hyper local to right around where you live? Or were you thinking of expanding, or were you thinking of connecting with others that could, show or model what you're doing? Or what were you thinking with that?
So I have this is where I kind of get into, like, I have a mini models viewpoint.
What is that, mini models?
So mini models is, every community has different resources, different needs, different inputs that they can use. So to say that my model that I have for my hive is the model that all hives should have would be, ignorant. Right, that it's not. It's going to fail somewhere else.
Yeah.
And imagine if we were to create a hive where, you grew greens for not just you, but for several other people. Those several other people grew other vegetables. Maybe somebody had a farm where they had pigs and cows, and maybe milk, whatever. And there was an interchange so that 100% of your food came from this collective. And maybe your cost, because of that, because everybody's contributing, maybe your cost comes down to as much as a weekly CSA basket of like $35 a week.
Something that I'm running into is I'm trying to do everything by myself. And if I had help, it would be a lot easier. And when I've reached out for help, I didn't always get the response that would have been helpful. What kind of person, what are the must-haves for the kind of person that would join the Hive? Obviously, they have to be in Austin, or they have to be a mile away, or they have to be in Texas.
Right, so that was another part of your questions. Let me answer that part of the question. As far as my hive, I'm trying to keep it within a 5 to 15 mile. I mean, really 5 miles is ideal. You get too much bigger than that and everybody's driving so far. So it's specific to my hive, 5 miles, but I also want to be a part of inspiring other people to start their own hives. And offering whatever support that I can to help those get off the ground, whether it's compost, seeds, my product. Like I want to help them at least get started until they can get sustainable on their own. And then between multiple hives, then we can have more interchanges between hives.
Is it a neighborhood community garden, or is it something different, or is it separate gardens that support each other, or what is that exactly?
I would say it's a loosely connected urban farm.
Okay, so
but, if somebody's got 5 acres, they could turn it into a community farm.
Okay, so let's take a look and see how this compost system is working. All right, so we have a shared community composting project. And where does this whole process starts with everyone bringing their food scraps and coffee grounds. Does that start over here?
Actually, it starts in the front of the house. So we have a bin like this in the front, and So people from the hive, they bring their kitchen scraps, and they just throw it in the bin in the front, and then next to
Are
the
there
bin,
rules on how they do that, or they just whatever you got throw it in?
just no meat, no dairy. So mainly like greens and veggie food scrap types.
Greens and veggies, cool.
And then we have a little bucket of pine shavings. So there's some over there. If you want, we can go and look at that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Top of my garden.
So this arrived already fairly pre-chopped for browns to add to greens.
Yep.
And this is the drop-off for the
So this
food
is a drop off. So right now it's empty. Someone today brought some food scraps, so you can kind of see that this was empty earlier. I just put a little bit of the chalk wood chips on the bottom, and then here is our pine shavings that Jesse was able to acquire for free. Someone does some woodwork, and they have bags of this all the time.
Oh wow.
And so he was collecting bags, and I think he told him to hold off for it because he accumulated so many bags.
Yeah.
But now I'm finding out that this is good bedding for different things, and I'm gonna start using it to grow some blueberries and things. My wife is really infatuated with growing blueberries now.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to the point where I can make some material to help with that.
Yeah, because they can't work at the soil here. Like you have to have acidity.
Actually, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But so we just grabbed some of this.
That keeps it from being smelly and other.
Yeah, it absorbs the odor. It absorbs the liquid, and as it gets piled higher, it adds that carbon layer. So it's not all greens, and it won't be slimy. There won't be maggots in here. So he had just emptied this, and you can see it. I didn't wash it out.
Yeah.
And there's no maggots. There is holes and stuff, and you can't smell anything.
So it kind of starts composting already, and it's prevented from being anaerobic.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So then you have wood chip pile. Awesome.
Yep. So, and then when that fills up, we'll bring it back here. And if we have a pile going, like the pile you just saw, that I just kind of turned and I just created, instead of putting that bin in that pile, we'll add it to a tumbler. Here we'll have like this kiddie pool or some sort of containment container for coffee grounds. So Jesse gets probably a 5-gallon bucket anywhere from once a week to 2 or 3 times a week, depending on when he has time to go pick it up. And now, instead of dumping it in the pile every time and just letting it sit there, he can dump it to this area. We had it dumped in this area, but then it was hard moving it to the pile, and because it's
really
in the dirt.
Fine particles. Yeah.
So a container, I think, works much easier. So he can dump until that's full, and then next time we need to rotate the compost and mix it up and heat it up, we can just put the coffee grounds right in there. And as that gets full, we have a backup composting thing that we can fill with 5-gallon buckets as well.
Nice.
So that's coming along, and it's becoming more efficient. And the next time I do this, like this time, I'm sure there'll be something I find that makes it easier. Especially, I did this all myself like 2 days ago. So it's a one-man operation, one-man-woman operation, and trying to get as efficient as possible, as little time as possible. Not everyone has 6 hours. They can work on this project or has the energy for it. So finding ways to make it more efficient.
And this is the pile that you're working to get to of 30 days.
Eventually, the goal is to try to break this down in 30 days.
So that was a look at Jesse's hive and the different compost projects going on. If you want to join one of our hives and you want to find out if you live close by, you can go to commongardenground.com/thrive. And at the bottom of the page, you'll see the different areas that we're by, and you could join. If you want to start something like this, make sure to subscribe, where I'll be offering support and templates of how you could start something like this in your neighborhood. And lastly, if you know anyone who would want to start this or anyone who would want to join in something like this, make sure to share this idea with others so that we can start growing food together that we can share. Thanks for watching.